Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a look at a massive cultural touchstone, a show that literally defined a generation. Yep, we're talking about Friends. For 10 whole seasons, this show gave audiences laughter, romance, and honestly, just a profound sense of comfort. It didn't matter how crazy the real world got, you always knew the group was going to find their way back to that famous apartment and, of course, that iconic orange couch. But today, we're going to explore a completely alternate reality. We're going to look at how this deeply comforting, warm finale almost had a very, very different meaning, carrying a much darker message that might have been hiding just beneath the surface the entire time. So let's just ask the big question right up front. What if the ending of Friends wasn't one of television's happiest goodbyes, but actually one of its most tragic? I want you to challenge your nostalgia for just a second here. What if that final famous shot of the six friends leaving Monica's empty apartment wasn't about exciting new beginnings at all? What if instead it marked the exact moment their world finally totally fell apart? Section 1. The ending we got. A baseline of comfort. Now, the reason the real ending worked so incredibly well is because it rewarded years and years of our emotional investment. Think about it. Monica and Chandler get that beautiful new house in the suburbs, Rachel famously gets off the plane, and Ross and Rachel finally reunite for good. Phoebe finds lasting love, and Joey remains super optimistic about his future in acting. Everybody finds exactly what they wanted. It's basically the ultimate satisfying message of hope and closure tied up in a neat little bow. Section 2. A realistic alternative. The pivot to realism. But let's plunge into what could have been. Picture the final season taking a much more bittersweet turn. Instead of everyone finding exactly what they want, each character faces the completely unavoidable consequences of change. In the original ending we all know and love, Rachel gets off the plane and the group basically stays close. But in a more realistic ending, Monica and Chandler still move to the suburbs, but instead of strengthening the group, this move becomes the ultimate catalyst for distance. Their new homeowner responsibilities leave very little time for those spontaneous coffee shop visits. The apartment that served as the center of their universe simply disappears. And Rachel? Well, in this version, she actually goes to Paris. At first, it plays out exactly like it does in real life. Everyone makes promises, right? Weekly dinners, regular phone calls, big holiday gatherings. These are the exact promises we all make when major life changes happen to our own friend groups. But then, life just gets busy. The weekly dinners become monthly. The phone calls turn into occasional, "Hey, how are you?" texts. Without that central apartment anchoring them together, the physical distance simply shatters their tight-knit dynamic. Section 3. How the characters change. Individual consequences. So the crucial point here is understanding how this realistic lens strips away all the sitcom comedy and totally alters their individual fates. Take Ross and Rachel. In this alternate timeline, Rachel actually accepts the Paris job. She doesn't get off the plane. She chooses her incredible career opportunity, and Ross is just left standing at the airport. It forces him to realize that love doesn't always guarantee a happy ending. It's not because they stop caring about each other, but because timing and personal growth pull them in opposite directions. One of television's most iconic romances literally becomes a stark story about missed chances. Meanwhile, Joey faces a seriously harsh reality. For years, the show treated his acting struggles as comedy, a punchline. But this darker ending forces a confrontation with the truth. Success might actually never arrive. The auditions start to dry up, the roles become smaller, and while his friends are out building families and overseas careers, Joey remains stuck. The loneliness that was always kind of hidden behind his humor starts becoming impossible to ignore, completely shifting the emotional tone of his entire story. And then there's Phoebe. She is, without a doubt, the most resilient and optimistic character in the group. Now, a darker ending wouldn't erase her optimism, but it would severely challenge it. She becomes the one person desperately trying to hold everything together, organizing reunions and making calls, but each year, fewer and fewer people show up. And it's not out of malice or anger, but simply because their lives are moving forward in different places. It's heartbreakingly normal. Finally, Ross. Throughout the whole series, Ross constantly struggled with change. A realistic ending forces him to confront his absolute greatest fear. Rachel is in Paris, the group is entirely scattered, the apartment is totally empty, and for the very first time in his life, this is a problem Ross simply cannot fix. He can't logic his way out of it, he just has to accept an empty space and live with it. Section 4. The tragedy of drifting. No villains, just life. Now, let's talk about the emotional core of this reality. Drifting. It's the slow fading of a relationship, not through conflict or some big dramatic fight,
but simply because timing, distance, and personal growth pull people in different directions. What's so fascinating and devastating about this version of the show is that it wouldn't require any villains or betrayals. It just mirrors a real-life phenomenon we all face. Friendships evolve, people move away. The older we get, the harder it becomes to recreate that magic of hanging out together every single day.
Let's trace this timeline for a second. If we were actually watching this play out on screen, you'd see the months pass and the calls get fewer. Years later, they're missing holidays together. By the time we reach that finale scene, their daily lives together are just distant memories. One by one, we see them absorbed in their separate worlds. Monica and Chandler busy with their kids, Rachel thriving overseas, Ross teaching and wondering what if, Joey still chasing roles, and Phoebe finally accepting that chapters just have to close. And then, the camera returns to the empty apartment, the place that literally felt like a second home to millions of viewers. But now, it is entirely silent. There are no jokes echoing off those purple walls. There are no silly arguments over relationships or intense games of apartment trivia. It is just the stark, quiet aftermath of a once-in-a-lifetime friendship. And there is no coffee, just memories lingering in a vacant room. The screen slowly fades to black, bringing this alternate timeline to its ultimate emotional rock bottom, with the really harsh realization that absolutely nothing lasts forever, not even the happiest, most perfect moments.
Section 5. Why Hope Still Wins. The Verdict on Realism.
So, would that dark ending have been powerful? Absolutely. It would have been incredible television. Would it have been realistic? In a lot of ways, yes, for sure. But would it have become one of the most beloved finales in television history? Probably not. Because at its core, Friends was never really about realism. It was about hope. A purely realistic ending would have fundamentally failed the show's core premise, the deeply held belief that friendship can survive the absolute chaos of life.
Ultimately, the writers definitely made the right choice. The show was always about finding people who become family. We crave this hopeful fiction because it reminds us of what we desperately want to believe is possible in our own lives, right? We want to believe that even when life inevitably changes, the people who matter the most to us can somehow remain a permanent part of our story. That is the happier, enduring message that has kept this show so deeply relevant decades later.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to reflect on today. If you were the one sitting in the writer's room, holding that final script, knowing everything we just discussed about how life naturally pulls people apart, would you choose the comforting hope of the finale we got? Or would you write the haunting realism of the ending we just explored? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this deep dive makes you look at this classic story in a whole new light.